To the Point with Michael Williams.
It's the whistleblower report that is the talk of the political world. It includes allegations that President Trump asked Ukrainian leader, their president, to investigate Joe Biden and his son, and that the White House then tried to hide the call. The president says he has done nothing wrong. How will all of this play in Florida politics? Good morning and welcome. The impeachment inquiry looks to overshadow all of politics. And to talk about that, we have a Democrat and Republican with long ties to Washington and our area, familiar faces, former Republican Congressman Tom Rooney and former Democratic Congressman Patrick Murphy, and both served in the district, now District 18, that covers St. Lucie, Martin, and parts of Palm Beach County. We thank you both for coming in. In no particular order, we'll begin with you, Congressman Rooney. Your overall reaction to the political bombshell this week?
Well, it's one more thing in a series of occurrences in Washington, D.C. that sort of put everybody in a position where they have to either come out against their own president or circle the wagons. And what we've seen in the last week, I always sort of like take a second to see what the reaction's going to be. And what we've seen by and large is the Republicans circle the wagons around the president and say that there was no quid pro quo and that there wasn't a definitive offer for money or withholding of money.
Military aid to Ukraine.
Exactly.
In return for investigating Joe Biden.
Joe Biden, who's his opponent in the election.
And really his son, who had worked for a Ukrainian energy company. And the argument went that that company, that the former vice president might have had the prosecutor back off and forced him to back off an investigation into the Ukrainian company that his son was being paid by.
But the thing that the Republicans have said in their talking points this week is he never really gets to the point where he says, if you will give me dirt on my political opponent, I will give you money for what, you know, from taxpayer money. But what he would say is that, you know, I was just investigating a former vice president in his official capacity, not a political opponent.
And that's the
Former
question.
Congressman Murphy, your take.
Yeah, you know, that's the question, is how much was the gun smoking, right? Democrats are saying it's on fire. It's very clear what happened here. He has said very clearly, you know, are you going to exchange this information? Was withholding this $391 million of aid. Then
which later went through to Ukraine.
Right, but this is after even Mitch McConnell was asking very serious questions to the president. Why aren't you giving this money? Simultaneously, Rudy Giuliani has sent over to, you know, meet with the Ukrainians to ask them, quote unquote, are you going to play ball with us?
Bottom line, do you think this impeachment inquiry is warranted?
Yes, I do. I think Democrats have to do something. I don't think they can stand idle.
Republicans are arguing it's overreach, that it's partisan, that it's trying to overturn the results of a 2016 election.
To make a football analogy, which I know he'll like, you know, if you're playing against somebody and they keep running up the middle, and every time they're getting 5 yards, they're going to keep doing it, right? They're not going to throw it deep.
Do you think the president's actions constitute a constitutional crisis based on the early reports and evidence, which both sides are debating fiercely?
I do, and I think what's important is to keep this in context. This isn't like the most, you know, rosy and clean president and administration. This is in a long series of instances of lying to the American people.
Mr. Rooney, do you think it's overreach? Do you think it rises to the level of a constitutional crisis that demands this inquiry based on what you've read and hear so far?
I think that if he went so far as to say the words, if you give me dirt on Joe Biden for my election in exchange for these Javelin defense capabilities, that would rise to the level. He always stays just shy enough, he keeps his powder just dry enough that he has deniability. And I think what you've seen with the Republicans retreat to their corners and the Democrats, you're seeing more and more get on board for impeachment. Now it's just becoming a political fight. And when you have a political fight, the chances of it going anywhere in the Senate are probably remote.
You both were in the House with Nancy Pelosi in leadership. She is yet again as Speaker. How do you think she's handled it? Again, her Democrats, many had been arguing for months they wanted to see an impeachment inquiry, even before the Ukrainian phone call that sparked the inquiry. Others said you didn't even wait to hear the phone call before you jumped to an inquiry. How's she handled it thus far?
She's been very hesitant to move forward with an impeachment. As you know, the far left has been pushing for this for months and months. So she knows the political consequences of this, right?
Which are?
What's the old saying?
If
you shoot for the king, don't miss. This would now be the second major attempt to go after the president if they don't have the evidence. And who knows if there's more, to fall here and what this investigation is going to lead to. I get the feeling there could be more examples of phone calls and claims like this from the president. So we'll see. From what we know now, though, I think she was forced forced to do this, basically, because you can't let this precedent continue for future administrations.
Your take on her actions, and does it boost or harm Early Reid, his reelection bid?
I totally agree. I think that she's played this probably as good as a speaker could play it, and I don't think that she knows where it's going to go as far as the political tea leaves. If she goes forward with this impeachment, does it hurt the Democrats in the election because it makes Trump look like a victim? Or is it something that the Democrats can rally around the big bad wolf and have their nominee follow that? I don't know if she has figured that out yet herself, but you know, her job is to be cautious and make sure she retains the House and wins the White House. So
a lot of swing districts out there, including the 18th, or what is now the 18th that you both served in, very closely split between Republicans and Democrats. Of course, currently occupied by a Republican, Brian Mast. We'll talk about his reaction in a moment. But as you look at swing districts around the country, a lot of Democrats in centrist districts are going to be looking at this closely. First, how do you think it plays in the 18th? How do you think it plays in swing districts nationally, Mr. Rooney?
I think that in the 18th, because it is a purple district, I mean, it's very close. I think that, you know, it's much more difficult for somebody like Brian Mast to kind of hedge his bets. Now, in the district that I ended up representing, which was extremely red, you have to be politically fully behind the president, supporting him. You'll see members of Congress out there already sending out emails raising money to support our president, defend him from the squad and the Dems. But in a district like Congressman Mast, he's got to be a lot more careful about how he words what he thinks should be done here moving forward.
To that point, and then I'll have you react. Congressman Brian Mast, the Republican who is on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and represents District 18 that you two represented, issued a statement saying, personally, I think this is a partisan farce. Speaker Pelosi and House Democrats decided they were going to impeach the president before they even knew what was said on the call. But now, Mast went on to say, I'm a member of a committee that's tasked with doing investigation on this. I take my work seriously, and I'm not going to fall into the same partisan trap that the Democrats did by going out there and litigating this in the media before even 1 ounce of fact-finding occurs. Former Congressman Murphy, your take on his response?
I'm surprised he was that bold, quite frankly, in such a swing district. If anything, I would expect a more balanced approach to, hey, let's let the evidence play out and let's see what we have, right? Let's be the juror. Let's be that check and balance that the Congress is supposed to be. Most people voting, right, in all districts, but especially in the swing districts like this, maybe it's 75, 80%, have made up their mind. They know if they like Trump or not. They know if they're a Democrat or not, by and large. That 20% or so that is sort of on the fence, I think kind of has an answer about Trump, and they know he's not the most honest person. They know what he's doing now follows in a long line of history in his business career and being a bully and sort of this mob boss mentality. But the question is, who is he going to be running against in 2020? And I think that's ultimately the question. Is it a more left Elizabeth Warren or a more centrist, you know, Joe Biden? I think that will be the context and the comparison that will be made with this impeachment as it plays out.
Mr. Rooney?
I totally agree. And by the way, Patrick and I both sat on the Intelligence Committee where we really got classified information and really sunk our teeth into a lot of details of issues like this. So learning both sides and understanding both sides before rushing to make a statement is something that we probably have more experience than most members of Congress. But the one thing I will say is that the one casualty of all of this that we could see in the future is maybe this is going to have a really negative effect on Joe Biden politically.
Because of the questions, it plays into the 2016 narrative of Trump. It's always the dealing. His son, who had no experience in energy policy, getting a very lucrative job with the Ukrainian gas company. No wrongdoing found there. There were issues with the company itself. But you think the blowback could be on that basis, political favoritism, political favors.
I'm not a Democrat, but I could see Democrats thinking like, you know, we just want to move on from all of this stuff. And I don't know that Trump's that much of a mastermind that he's like, that's what I planned to do all along. So now I get Elizabeth Warren, who's really left, and then that's going to help me win. You know, he might not be that politically smart, but I think that, you know, Biden's going to have to explain himself and what was going on here so people understand what exactly he was doing.
Let's take a look at some other reactions. I want your response. We'll take a look at what some others are saying. Senator Rick Scott, Republican senator, former governor of Florida, of course, to reporters said, I still haven't seen there's a violation of the law. I don't know what law he, the president, violated yet. Governor Ron DeSantis reacted by starting a fundraising effort. The Republican governor, who owes his victory in large part to President Trump's support, said, "As governor of Florida, I want the president to know we have his back in this fight 100%. So today I'm issuing the Presidential Protection Fund to fight back against this disgusting attempt to overturn a legitimate U.S. election." Typical of the Democrats is the statement from U.S. Representative Lois Frankel from our area. "Enough is enough," she said. "I join Americans calling for impeachment proceedings." And Democratic Congressman Ted Deutsch from the Boca Raton area said Americans have now seen with their own eyes the depth of this president's wrongdoing. Sadly, almost every elected Republican has remained silent in the face of the president's corruption, obstruction, and abuse of power. A lot to unpack there. Let's start with the governor's comments in this purple state that then candidate, now President Trump, barely won. He's already thrown down the gauntlet in full support of the man, the president who helped him earn the governor's match. And your take on Governor DeSantis' move early on?
You know, I've seen a lot of people throw out fundraising emails in wake of this and a lot of other things. I mean, that's what politicians do. But, you know, when Senator Scott says that I haven't seen a violation of law, again, it gets back to, was there a definitive quid pro quo? And is there enough gray area that you could say, well, we can't really prove that? So,
if there's enough gray, would you say you need to back off this impeachment inquiry? Bottom line.
I think that Pelosi's got to be really careful, because if she makes Trump look like a victim, it could really hurt her and the Democrats' chances.
You're reading tea leaves in the state, in a purple state, as the governor when you say I'm all in. Of course, again, with the political ties to the president, it would have been surprising had he done anything else. But your take on his comments and what you're hearing from other Democrats and Republicans weighing in strongly when the evidence on both sides is still rolling out.
It's almost comical. I mean, I hate to say it. It's exactly what Congressman Rooney said. Most people have made up their mind. Most politicians have to walk the party line on this, and that's exactly what we're seeing playing out. How much are they going to dig in? We'll see. But what's interesting is to think about our two Republican colleagues there, what they would have said had this been President Obama. Right, to think of the contrast there is no like doubt. A joke, right? What they would be up in arms if this was President Obama. Yeah. Come on, give me a break. So we'll see how this plays out. But one thing we haven't really mentioned, it's one thing this phone call that the president had, we've seen the recording, is then the obvious cover-up by the White House.
The alleged cover-up that they tried to put it in a high-security server, tried to lock down the call, the whistleblower.
It's not alleged. We know it went to that lockbox, right? And that's almost unprecedented. And
their excuse for that is that everything's getting leaked now, so everything has to go in the line.
Is it the old Watergate era, the alleged cover-up worse than the crime, the alleged crime?
Right. And then beyond putting it in this lockbox is then this procedure where the attorney for the CIA sends it to the to the Inspector General. Inspector General sends it to the Director of National Intelligence, who shall send it to the Intelligence Committee. Then Attorney General Barr interferes in that process, redirects it back to the White House, basically going against everything we should do for whistleblowers.
I really want some closing comments, because in this gotcha world we live in of polarized politics, it's about who scores political points, whether it's now or in 2020, who loses politically. But from a constitutional point of view and from a point of view about what's happening to American government at the federal level right now, I'd like perspective. On top of that, the president will be speaking out about it, no doubt. He's announced he'll be in Florida next Thursday, stopping at the Villages in Central Florida to talk about protecting and improving Medicare. But you can bet, of course, that this will be topic A, B, and C, perhaps, along with Medicare. Talk to my question, though, about your concerns as we look in the totality of where we are in this country right now, both in terms of the investigation and more broadly what it says about the divisiveness going on. We'll begin with you, former Congressman Rooney.
I would just say, on its face, if a United States sitting president is talking to a foreign leader about U.S. tax dollars potentially going to that country, and then pivoting shortly thereafter to whether or not they have investigated one of his political rivals. Again, it does not look good for our republic. It doesn't look good for our standing in the world. And, quite frankly, it's something that I wish never would happen. It seems to happen time and time again, but it seems to happen to a point where it never really gets to the level where Republicans are crossing the aisle and saying enough. This needs to be investigated, enough is enough. And this is the same thing.
Former Congressman Murphy?
It would be nice to go back to the days when we were talking about, real issues that so...
Healthcare, the economy.
Right, that people really
Medicare,
do care about. I'm not saying they don't care about this, but I think they're exhausted by this, right? It's just wearing people out time after time. The allegations against the president, whether it's true or not, we know that's for the people to decide. But we have so many important things we need to be worried about, from national security to healthcare to immigration, all these important things, and they're just not being talked about.
And lastly, since I have you, what electoral future might we see if I get my crystal ball out for you quickly, and then you, former Congressman Rooney?
I'll wait to see what he does.
No,
maybe we'll do something together, okay?
Is there electoral future? What about 2020 for you?
No, 2020, no. I'm enjoying, commenting and watching my friends in D.C.
And what about you?
Maybe when my kids get through high school, Patrick and I will run for something together.
In our next segment, and I see an old statewide political editor circling when I talked about a future in electoral politics, we'll have Brian Crowley along in a moment. Thank you both for your perspective on a most serious topic. We look to have you both back in the near future. Thank you for perspective that only you two can offer. We appreciate it. And coming up next, we'll look at what happened in Florida politics the last time a president was impeached. What impact could impeachment have on next year's campaigns? That and more when we come back. Instead of our usual roundtable, we're going to take a look at the last time a president went through impeachment proceedings, how it affected Florida politics. Joining me, no one better for this than News Channel 5 political analyst Brian Crowley, who worked as a reporter, statewide political reporter and editor covering Florida politics, then for the Palm Beach Post. The Clinton impeachment, impeached but not convicted in the Senate. Nonetheless, talk about the impact it had in the 1990s on politics in Florida.
Well, it had a dramatic impact on Florida politics. It was just as divisive then as it is now. When it came time to cast votes on impeaching Bill Clinton.
For the Monica Lewinsky affair.
For the Monica Lewinsky scandal, the nation and the state's congressional delegation was divided on party line. One simple example is our two U.S. senators at the time, Bob Graham and Connie Mack. Bob Graham, the Democrat, voted no. Connie Mack, the Republican, voted yes to impeach, to convict. And that pretty much summed up the way the whole state and the nation was thinking at the time, very similar to the way we're thinking today with Donald Trump.
In our purple state, as you often point out, that's really is won by narrow margins by the Republicans or Democrats. How do you see this playing out in purple state battleground Florida next year? Political fortunes that rise or fall. I know it's a crystal ball that we're asking you to pull out, but based on your sense and your history, give us at least a broad sense of how it can play out.
Well, based on what we know today, I would say that the two sides will remain just as strong with their bases. One of the things that struck me after the Bill Clinton impeachment, he went to an event in Florida, and he went to work the rope line after his speech, and I was watching to see how women were going to react to Bill Clinton. Well, they flocked to the rope line. They wanted their pictures taken with Bill Clinton, and it showed me that there was this depth of support for Bill Clinton that wasn't going to erode just because of this impeachment. The same may be true about Donald Trump. Will
this drive people to the polls in Florida next year? Does an issue like this tend to drive people? As you heard former Congressman Murphy say, people are saying, I've hit tilt with all this. Will it drive them away? And you talk crucially about the 1/3 of our electorate in Florida that's NPA, non-party affiliated. It would seem that will be where the key may be on their take on all of this. Your sense of that?
Oh, absolutely. The independent voter in this state is the voter who's going to carry this next election.
And therefore, what they think of this impeachment inquiry.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say, as of today, so far the Democrats have not done a very good job in talking about the impeachment and why they're taking this step. I think their messaging has been weak. I think some folks are a little confused as to what's going on. Whether they like Trump or don't like Trump, it's going to be very important that the Democrats get their messaging together about this, because Trump will out-message them every time.
And as a matter of fact, planning to come to the Villages next week, he canceled that trip, had to cancel that trip at one point. He's coming back to the Villages in north central Florida next week to talk ostensibly about Medicare, but this will be front and center as he pounds away at that Florida message in this crucial state.
And I think he'll wind up with a huge crowd, and the huge crowd will be very, very supportive. I don't think we'll see any movement of the needle unless something dramatic happens between now and then. When Donald Trump arrives at the Villages, I think his support in Florida at this moment remains as strong as it was, and I think the Democrats are still wondering who their nominee is going to be, so it's hard to gauge what's going to happen. And look, the fact of the matter is the issues involving Biden and his son, the Atlantic, I think it was the Atlantic magazine, did an extensive story about this some months ago, and there are some legitimate questions about what went on there, and I think that the Republicans will continue to pound away at that, so it's going to be very complicated. As
always, no one better with the Florida perspective than you, Brian, and we'll have your final comments in just a moment. The Crowley closer.
One of the great things about having Tom Rooney and Patrick Murphy on is, there's a Republican and a Democrat. They actually are civil with each other. They can discuss issues together. And one of the things I found very disturbing last week was you all reported, as did some other news outlets, that there was a Palm Beach Gardens middle school teacher who gave a quiz to his students that included a line that you could check whether or not Donald Trump was dumb. First off, I don't know what you're teaching these kids, but if you're trying to teach them kindness and how to show respect, that's not the way to do it. And maybe this teacher needs to learn a little something from Tom Rooney and Patrick Murphy.
We could all learn with some civility lessons right now in this country, political and otherwise. As always, Thank you for your perspective, Brian. We appreciate it so much. Also, I'd like to bring your attention to a special we have on school called Securing Our Schools and what it takes to keep children safe in this time of school shootings and such concern. You can see it on WPTV.com, the WPTV app, our app on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Android TV. Please click on it to watch anytime. We appreciate you taking time. Such a vital topic. Thank you for spending time with us on today's To The Point. If you'd like to send comments about the broadcast, go to WPTV.com, click on the To The Point page, and have a section to send us your views. For Brian and our entire team, appreciate you being with us. And as always, wishing you a great day and a great week.